This is back after a long break of doing those kind of videos. First of all, thanks so much, Rodrigo, for taking the time.
Thank you.
This is awesome. This is another quick episode of the Dublin Guitar Duets. And today with me is Rodrigo, an amazing guitar player from currently Ireland, but we go into that a bit more in detail during the talk. Let's introduce yourself.
My name is Rodrigo Almonte. I'm a Peruvian-born Irish resident guitarist. I studied a bit here. I've done lots of Peruvian music when I was in Peru. I went through Brazil for a while, learned the culture and the music there. Did my bachelor here in New Park, then I was lucky enough to get on a scholarship to go and do my master's in the Netherlands, and luckily they sent me to New York. Well, I had the chance of studying with like all my heroes, and now I'm here, back again.
As people probably heard in the introduction and those episodes they see here on YouTube, they're mainly about jazz guitar, not exclusively, but with a big emphasis on it. And you're obviously playing an archtop in front of us. But take us back, how did you start playing the guitar and what kind of style was it when you started out?
I'd say I started late enough, like I wasn't an early bloomer. My dad always wanted my brother to learn the guitar, so there was a guitar in the house, but not for me. I ended up grabbing it whenever there were lessons for him, and like I'd say that would have been rock and a bit of maybe Latin American influenced music, be it a bit of cumbia or things like that. But then I was lucky enough that early enough I got a teacher that showed me a bit of improvisation, but not in a jazz context too much. It was mostly blues and Santana, and understanding that concept of look at him doing this here and then look at him playing a live concert and being completely different, and you'll be like, wow, yeah, that used to be cool. That would have been the beginning, but then also it was really, well, I was lucky enough to learn how to play a couple of Peruvian instruments from when I was a kid, like be it what you guys call the pan pipes. We call it zampoña, so like I used to play a bit of that and a bit of quena, which is like a Peruvian flute, and the bass drum for like these Andean Peruvian groups. So I was involved with all of that, but then in general in Peru you get loads of Latin American music, like be it salsa, cumbia, and all of that everywhere. And all the African, like, you know, descendant music. You have all this Afro-Peruvian music that is, you know, you go to a cafe and it'll be there, or you go to, you know, a family restaurant and you'll be listening or dancing to that all the time. So you always kind of like have that in the back of your mind even while you're playing when I was a kid. But I'd say the beginning would have been rock, blues, and all of those kind of things.
Or was that a gateway for you into later on jazz a little bit, or is there actually a Peruvian jazz scene? Because I'm from here.
There definitely wasn't a Peruvian jazz scene. I'd say the first time I realized, you know, interesting things would be listening to pianists playing salsa. You'd be like, oh, you know, that actually sounds interesting, rather like complicated, and you couldn't get it. But no, there wasn't a Peruvian jazz scene. I learned my things, had a, you know, good few teachers that would have tried maybe once or twice to show me something, but I'd be like, no, that's not for me. Until I was, I'd say, 16 or 17. But a guy had come from far away, from Brazil, a Peruvian dude that had studied there. And everybody was saying like, oh, look, this dude is, you know, he's really cool and he's studied abroad. And he's giving lessons. So I got lessons with him, and he had studied in a school that belongs to the Berkeley School of Network, like the network. So basically he, you know, landed and gave me all of these jazz stuff, like Berkeley stuff, and said like, you have to learn all of this. And we did, I think, a year of classes. And that was like literally baptized into whatever Berkeley says jazz is.
That's amazing. That's really good. It was just one guy who
just the one guy,
in Brazil,
the guru.
Amazing. That's fantastic. I had no idea about that. That sounds really cool. Was that guy maybe one of the, or let me ask it in a different way. You know, sometimes people have this click moment where they say, okay, that's what I want to do for a living. That's what I want to do all the time. Was he an influence towards that, or was it just natural?
Oh no, he was. He definitely was. But then also I remember at the same time, many things kind of aligned for me to end up deciding to do music, because I was actually enrolled in a college in Peru doing electronic engineering for a year and a little bit, because there was no way in Peruvian culture you can't, or you weren't supposed to study music. It's not a thing at all. Nowadays it's a bit more like open, but still at the time I remember he came back from Brazil. A friend of mine told me that Brazil had another college that did music for free which is actually called Tattoo. It's really cool. Ended up going there for a while too. But anyhow, that, and then I met these famous guitarists, famous quote unquote, from Peru, who came to give a concert in my city, and I asked him at the end of his concert, like, how do you decided to be a musician? How did it go for you? And he said something in the lines of, oh, my parents didn't want to. Now I'm in the best position in my life, economically speaking, and whatever, I'm actually enjoying it and playing with lots of people. And I've gone here and there and done this and that. And I was like, shit, okay, so it's possible. Like, the legends are true. Yeah. And I remember after that, talking to that guy, I was like, okay, so this seems viable. Like, I may give it a try. And, managed to get a hold of a scholarship to go in Brazil after, I think, a couple of months of that. So everything just literally aligned perfectly. And I was like, okay, it's time to go and study this.
That's super interesting. And when you say you got like this kind of 1 year baptizing of like Berkeley jazz information, in your own progression, did you kind of go through the history of jazz like many students go, where you kind of start from kind of early swing and bebop, then through the ranks, or did you just get everything at once?
I got a weird combination of really traditional stuff and really 70s fusion, because that's what that specific dude that came back. He was a guitar player. He liked those two things. So he didn't make me do this, but he gave me I remember a pen drive at the time with hundreds of albums, and said, you just listen to this. So what I did is I erased everything else I had that I was listening to, like Beat, Santana, and Steve Vai, and things like that, and I just put everything he gave me and said, okay, I'm gonna force myself to listen to this. And it was loads of early Miles, and then really, big band, old stuff, and loads of fusion. I think it must have been some kind of overload, because I'm not a big, massive fan of that right now. But that gave me an overall idea of two really contrasting guitar roles in what jazz could do. But it really took longer for me to really, only when I was in Brazil, I said like, oh, okay, I actually like the role of the guitar in jazz fully. When I had checked all the things, like more contemporary stuff, like Ross and Winkler or Lag and things like that. But at that time, no, it was just this weird combination of really traditional, like, Wes Montgomery, and then you press forward and you'll have Mike Stern playing the weirdest thing. Yeah.
That's very interesting to just get a glimpse of how, like, for me and maybe for some people listening, for how somebody from the other end of the world gets their introduction into jazz, because I think it's very different everywhere, but there's similarities in terms of like a personal big influence or something like that. Looking forward, how did your journey lead you to Ireland?
I ended up in Brazil for 2.5 years-ish. The program there used to be this Berkeley network thing where you'll do 2 years and then you either go to Berkeley or, bye-bye, that's it. And it was really intense. So then by the end of the 2 years, you actually felt like you had done a full college. But the year I was finishing that, they had just got a permit to start being a proper bachelor course and have third year and fourth year. But it wasn't that great, because it was just starting, so it was really, really messy. So then my guitar teacher knew certain people, because he was part of that International Association of School of Jazz, I think, that thing. And he said, maybe, contact this school in Europe or this and that, because I wasn't really that much of a fan of going to Berkeley. There were other things that I was maybe trying to do. And one of the ones that I contacted was Newpark. And Ronan, they straight ahead reply, and they were happy to take me. And it took no time, like it was really, really straightforward.
That's amazing. And how did you find, not even so much the college, but life in Europe, and especially in Ireland, which is, again, some people would say different again to Europe, but how was it for you to get accustomed to maybe the climate and the people and everything?
The climate is not, like, I know it's bad, but it's not that it's that shocking. Like, I don't know, in Peru it rains a lot, and there's lots of sun too, but like I already know what rain is. I was in Sao Paulo, and like you'll get these massive, rainforest showers. So I was okay with that, like with the cold and all of that. It's the people. I was expecting way much more colder. Everybody would be, I don't know, really separate or something. But I found Irish people really, really good crack. Like, they are amazing. And then I went, let's say, to, I don't know, Finland or places like that, and you kind of get this other more specific idea of what I was expecting. But no, it was fine. And I really like this kind of quiet life that you can get in places like here compared to other big cities, which is like, it suits me a lot. And I came here, I was like, oh, wow, okay, this is the right place at the right time.
Maybe shifting from that on the background side of things a little bit to the guitar playing and the music things of your things. People obviously heard already a little bit, so they have a little bit of an idea. But if you would have to describe your own playing where you are at the moment, and I sometimes ask people that, sometimes I do it with guitarists or like kind of general musicians, but if you could describe your own playing as a mix of like three musicians that were a huge influence on you, what would that be for you?
Mix of three. Jesus. Definitely number one, and I am proud to copy from him as much as I can and study him. Lage Lund. Let me think. Number two, or like, among the other ones, I'd say I was a massive Winkler fan since, again, the moment I hit Brazil. I got a same kind of story. I got a list of CDs that I had to listen, and he was there straight ahead, and I was like, wow, I like this. So loads of his approach to composition, it's amazing, and like, melodic information is just pretty. Them two would be like the top of my list of people that I really follow. From there on, maybe Gilad, really modern, contemporary, or if you want to go back a little bit, maybe Vic Uris or Bill Frisell, them kind of people that have this more open, melodic approach rather than a really straight bebop, a bebop forward style, I'd say.
Yeah, like there's definitely some Lage you can hear there, like influence, which is great to hear. Actually, it's phenomenal. Just want to keep on asking in this direction because I know that from you a little bit. You went on to do your masters in the Netherlands, and if I remember correctly, what you told me, one of the big projects in your masters was like a transcription of a complete or multiple Lage Lund albums.
Well, that was my thesis. Yeah. So like I literally wanted to prove that imitating somebody doesn't necessarily have to be him, but anybody could really create your own, or like strengthen your own creativity in a way. So I grabbed him as an example because I really liked his music, and I was already a big fan and transcribing some of it beforehand. And yeah, I grabbed every possible album and recording I could find of him and transcribe it and try to understand and spend more time in a few of them rather than all of them. There's my whole lifetime to go back to that and look at it if I needed, but try to get a big glimpse of everything he did and then compare, how did he change and what stayed from the beginning. So yeah, I try to. It was amazing because I got to go to New York after that, and even in New York I was having weekly lessons with him. So like if he would play, let's say today in Smalls at night, and I had a lesson with him tomorrow, I'll go to the gig, film it, record it, and then get home, transcribe it, and bring it to the class and say like, hey dude, you played this last night. Why did you do this and that and those? So yeah, it was pretty intense in the sense of I really wanted to try and understand him any possible way.
Would he, like, if you just say the example, would he actually, if you brought something, I mean, it's obviously depending on the situation, but would he give you an answer on that, or would it be more like even, it was in the moment? Or?
Depends. Sometimes I have to ask something in three ways, like three different angles until I get an answer that sounds better than, either sure or like, I was in the moment or, something a bit more ambiguous. But yeah, eventually he would, like, there's loads of things that he is really conscious of many things he's doing. So I was happy to ask all of that and get the answers that I assume I already kind of knew.
And talking about transcription as well, like you said, you have this thesis where you put a lot of input from Lage Lund. What's your workflow when you do a transcription? Like, do you slow things down at all? Do you listen to the recording just by itself, or do you sometimes use a program where you can hear it a bit clearer or things? Or what's your take on that?
I go as far as slowing it down if necessary for like a normal transcription, because that after a while you get good enough that you may not need to slow it too much, or maybe if you loop something you can understand it better than if you were slowing things down and you just get a note every so often that doesn't really make sense as a sentence. So after a while, because it's the same language he's speaking, I'll understand his sentences in a way. But also in a similar fashion, whenever I wanted to get really in depth something he did, and let's say there was a video of him doing something, or like there was a thing I knew he did, and I'll start looking for videos online of him playing until I find that thing of him. I'll look at the video. I remember in college with a massive like screen, look at the hand and just see like, okay, why is he putting the hand in there in that way when he could be doing it this way? Like, try to really get in his mind and try to imitate loads of things just to see why would that sound this way and not that way. And then ask him if I had the chance.
You didn't just go like for the contextual information where you say, okay, he plays a C sharp over an A or whatever, like just note for note. You really went into, okay, how does he play? What's the fingering? What's the technique he uses? What's the
exactly?
The
and like
method?
he has a system for all of that, as well as anybody. Like anybody you would ask has some kind of system that works for them. And now it's cool to know that from him or anybody. And then if it works for you, cool, you can improve on that. Or if it doesn't, at least the concept of it works, and then you can work around your own way. But yeah, it was literally trying to get as much juice from the music he produced and take advantage of it whenever I was in New York. I remember one thing that he was saying when I was asking him at one point, your hand looks kind of weird when you're playing this phrase because you're doing it, with these fingers rather than these other fingers. We got into a massive conversation, but at the end of the day, his idea is that with, in this specific scenario, with these fingers, rather, with two fingers, he can get a better tone or more similar tone all the time than rather than using the whole hand. So then he'll only use two fingers for certain arpeggios at certain points. That he would do, let's say, because then you have control of every two fingers. Like the sound is going to be more uniform. So then he'll apply that into actual arpeggios. So like all the time it's either two fingers and it's heavier, and then there's always some kind of a hammer embedded there in the bottom of every pick he does. So like all of these little details were things that to me were more important than you played a flat 2 or a 1, or like you played these voices. No, those are things that I could do in my own time. This is more to really get how he expresses himself with the actual instrument, because that's what I like the most. Like he sounds really unique in that sense.
He does, yeah. It's great that you kind of go into this approach, because as you said, that the theoretical thing, what's a note or a chord, or what are the notes of this phrase, everybody can figure that out with enough time on the record. But having those one-to-one lessons in New York and taking your master's thesis time to really get in depth with that's something really valuable. That's like very unique. In terms of, not many people do that.
Yeah, no, it was blessed, man. It was really like one of the best experiences I've had. And not even just that, like there's loads of people in New York that have really unique voices. So getting to meet all these people and getting to also understand how they think of music and think through the guitar or their instruments, it's incredible, like really inspiring. You can't imagine how inspiring it is.
Speaking of inspiring, you also are in the process of at the moment promoting your first album as a leader, as a composer, I presume.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk us through this, or just explain, tell us what it's about? Did you do it as part of your masters, or did you just got the people over there in the Netherlands, or how did it start?
So it's called Distancia, which is distance in English or in Spanish. Some of the compositions, I actually wrote them when I was here. Some of them when I was in New York. Some of them when I was in the Netherlands. But it wasn't it was a consequence of the masters, but it wasn't like a part of it. I came back from New York, finished the masters, and I knew which people would actually be the best to play my music. And most of them were people that I had met through that Netherlands connection. So it was just a matter of organizing, and everybody was happy to do it. And we got all together for a couple of days in a really lovely studio in Utrecht. Literally, if I'm not mistaken, it's a year ago from now, or a year ago from yesterday, something like that. And it was amazing. All the music was, in a way, inspired by different things I had done at different points in, like, be it Ireland or the Netherlands, different people I was studying with or playing with. But it was really nice because we got together a week before the recording, and we really spent enough time getting the nicks and knacks of, every little corner of the compositions. And I was happy to change little things so that it accommodates the band better. So we end up playing, rather than my versions, the versions that band would make the best out of it.
As a question about composition, just to pick your brain of how do you see it, how do you approach it? In my head, there's always, in the jazz realm, there's once the idea of writing very detailed and very, almost like compared to classical music, like parts and very, very precise instructions. And then there's the opposite world of the lead sheet, where you have a basic harmonic concept and a basic melodic concept, and then people kind of express themselves over that. Where between those two worlds would you say your music is?
Depends of the project and the band. Like for example, for this project, I knew exactly who was gonna be playing, so I had the freedom of really writing specific things for each one of them. So it was a bit more, rather than lychee, it was a bit more elaborated, way much more, I'd say. But I did have, there's lots of compositions that I've written for other things that are way much more basic, because it works better for, let's say, if you want to go to the studio, the easier the other musicians have it, the better. So if it's something they, the bare bones of what they need, then that's enough. But for this album, it was really specific things sometimes. But again, it was nice to see that for the actual recording, we had looked at the music that much that there was no need for papers or anything. We actually knew the songs enough, and we knew our parts.
What's the lineup in the band?
The main core of the band is drums. It's Roberto Pistolesi from Italy. He lives in the Netherlands. Piano, that's Lorenzo Vitolo, also from Italy. He's living in Switzerland, I think. Then Rafael Abdallah, he used to be here in Ireland a few years ago. On double bass, Daniel Juarez, a sax player from Madrid. He's amazing. Myself on guitar, that being the main core. And then we have two guests. We have alto sax, his name is Michael Moore. Really, really nice sax player. He was one of my teachers in the Masters. And then we had the pleasure of having Rogério Bocato, which is a percussionist, Brazilian percussionist that lives in New York. He's at the time, I think he's playing with Yotam, with Patitucci and Brian Blade, and Marie Schneider, I think. But anyhow, he was happy to be part of the project. He couldn't come, the pandemic and all of that, but he managed to, put some tracks on top of some of the songs.
Speaking of the music, and maybe just because you said percussion there, but I know it's hard to describe your own music because it's always hard to compare it to other stuff, because for us it's always unique as we write it. But do you, is there an attempt from you to combine maybe some of where you came from with South American music into this music fused with jazz, or is it more stuff you learned along the way and it's now something completely different?
No, definitely there has to be some influence, because at one point you have to understand that anything that you can use in your favor that sounds good, it's a good idea. And maybe at the beginning I was going against it, because I don't know, as a kid you tend to think that wherever you came from is not good, but definitely there's loads of influence of, be it Peruvian rhythms, or let's say there's one song that the melodies are really, when I wrote that song I said I want this to sound like an Andean Peruvian song, and how a melody would be played in a quena or an Andean instrument, and how would it sound, and then try to bring it to wherever I'm, whatever my musical context is, but it literally came from there. Then there's another one that it's really based on a specific Peruvian rhythm, and I, kind of wanted it to sound like a Peruvian rhythm, but then it's not fair for whoever is playing it and doesn't really know the rhythms. So I'm in this place where I know lots of my music is influenced by Peruvian music and South American music. There's some Brazilian stuff there too. But I'm happy to explore the new possibilities of how would that evolve being played by musicians that haven't encountered that up to just yet. And then they have their own story behind them and their own massive skills. So then that weird combination in the middle is what really fascinated me for the recording.
Just in closing, two more questions. One, obviously, when is the album out and where can people find it?
The album is out with Odradek Records on the 29th of October, last Friday of October. But you can pre-order it right now because we're doing a crowdfunding campaign. It's on fundit.ie. You can find it must be one of the latest projects, or in all my social media. If you find me on Rodrigo Almonte on Facebook, or I think it's rodrigoalmonte.music on Instagram. Or you'll find all the links there for the funded campaign to pre-order the album, and you can get some juicy things too. I think all the scores or the video version of the album and many other things.
And one last question that actually I plan on asking that more people as the series starts again. Is the last year was obviously really weird for people who might watch it at a different time. Now we're having we have 2021 and it's September, so obviously we're 1.5 years of COVID. Especially for musicians, that has been a quite hard time. Not able to perform and basically make their living from that is really rough. But I mean, apart from that, even on a creative side, how did you deal with the last year in terms of not being able to play as much as you want and maybe keeping motivated and staying practicing like that? How did you deal with that?
Let me think of an honest answer to that.
That's good.
Two ways, I think. One, out of frustration, because I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a call for scores, like, writing scores and compositions for this, an ensemble here in Ireland. And I said, like, I'm going to spend a bit of time. That was like a motivation. And I did that, and then I didn't get a pick. And I was like, shit, I want to do something with this. So I started writing more music in that specific style, and that's something that may come out next year that I'm trying to work on with, more of like an orchestral ensemble. But it kept me going for months of like me trying to sort out something that they didn't allow me to do or something like that. So that kept me going. And then besides that, just the mere fact of having, I know we have a rough time, but still there was enough time, which is a good thing. I do find music part of my daily basis and like part of what relaxes me sometimes. So it is a good escape every so often. Even if you're not taking it as, I need to practice every day, those 10 or half an hour of time that you spend there may bring things down a little bit. So I'd say those two, like, as a relaxing mechanism, as a frustration freedom, freedom or something.
Perfect. That's an amazing answer. Thanks so much for taking the time.
You're welcome.
That's it from me and for the questions. We're gonna play a tune in a second. But any last words from you?
I hope we get to see more music live around here, and I hope if you ever see me playing anywhere, come and say hi. Happy to talk to everybody. Just that.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Rodrigo.
Welcome.